Hi, I'm Michael Everts, and this is Fit to be Read. Thank you for watching. This is my first time doing a mid-year wrap-up, so I'm going to just go ahead and tell you about the books that I've read, most of the books I've read this year, and the books that I've reviewed this year. If you haven't seen these full reviews, go back onto my video page and look for them, and you can see the full review. On all of the book reviews, you're also going to find some of them at the beginning of the review, but most of them at the end of the review. You're going to see the parody tribute music that I made using popular music, popular songs that you'll probably know, but incorporating lyrics that are relevant and evoke imagery from the book that I talked about. In no particular order, I reread The Left Hand of Darkness this year by Ursula Le Guin. This was a really great read. This is set on the planet Gethin, also known as Winter. We follow this main character, Genly I, and he goes on this trek with another character who is from the planet Gethin. Genly is there because he's trying to get to test out and see if Gethin is a good candidate to join this confederacy of nations. This is part of Le Guin's heinous cycle of novels. And what's most interesting about this is the long trek that they go over this long wintry terrain. And it's interesting because these characters have different ideas about gender, different ideas about life and about politics, and they're going to have to overcome a lot of that in order for them to have a successful chance at survival. Earlier this year, I also reread a few of the novellas in Martha Wells' novella series, Murderbot. This is All Systems Red. This is the first book in the series. We follow this artificial, non-human character. It's pretty funny because the character has sort of this attitude of like, I just want to sit and watch soap operas all day, and sometimes they do that. But there's a lot of action in this. It's a good one to jump into if you're looking for something that's light and not too deep. This is not going to be Isaac Asimov or Arthur C. Clarke level looking at and using artificial beings as a means through which we can examine humanity. It's fun, it's quick, the action is good, you've got space opera, you've got some fight scenes. Highly recommend it. My friend Whitney at The Secret Sauce of Storycraft sent me Nancy Kress's Beggars in Spain. This was an interesting read. It's hard for me to always remember novels after a few months. That's why I reread them so often. The thing that most comes to mind about this is I, in my head, labeled this as sort of Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged light, because it was sort of this, you have this privileged group or the achievers, and there's a big focus on, you know, what is ours and what is theirs. We're the achievers, and we're the ones that deserve everything, and should we share our benefits and our privilege with everybody else. And the privilege that we're talking about is, this is a world in which now babies can be given the ability to grow up without the need of sleep. And because of that, you're obviously going to have these advantages, like, you know, when everybody else is sleeping, you could be practicing tennis, you could be working with tutors, what have you. Obviously, much greater advantages in intelligence. I'm glad I'm showing you this one after Murderbot, because I did a musical parody for this one, and I used Justin Bieber, and I used the same song, a different part of the song, but the same song for this one as I used for Murderbot. And I could also mention that for Ursula Le Guin's Left Hand of Darkness, I used the song Africa by Toto. So check those out if you think that might be fun to listen to the music. That's one of my favorite things to do on BookTube, is creating lyrics for these books that resonate or evoke feelings or emotions from the books. It's actually something that when I go back and just listening to the song, it helps me to recall a lot of what happened in the book. Whereas Beggars in Spain was a novella that I was a little harsh on. It wasn't my favorite read of the year. I enjoyed the reading experience, but I definitely had a lot of critiques for it. You can check that out on the review. One that I really loved this year was a reread of Greg Egan's Diaspora. You're going to see a lot of Greg Egan on this video because I read a lot of Egan. Sometimes, like, I'll finish an Egan book and I just want to go to another one because it's the space that I like to live in with my brain. A lot of it is above my head, but above my head is a place I like to be. I feel like, you know, if you can trick me into learning while I'm listening to a story, I kind of like that, and Egan does that a lot. And little by little, I'm understanding physics and quantum theory a little bit more than I did beforehand. Did I say Incandescence or did I say Diaspora? Well, Incandescence will be next, so let's talk about Diaspora first. This one is one of the books that I'll recommend often to folks who are just starting out with Egan. Starting out with a short story is a good idea. In Axiomatic and Oceanic are two of his short story compilation books. That's a good place to start. I'll also divert and tell you that I did do a episode you can find on my video page too, and it's a where to start. I think it's titled Must Read is the thumbnail, but it's a basically it's a where to start with Greg Egan. It's a where to start with Samuel Delany, where to start with Ursula Leguin, where to start with Ray Bradbury. So it's featuring those 4 authors. Check that out. That's a good video if you've missed it. I think it's called Must Read. So it's like a lot of their work just quickly summarized, and then kind of where you might want to start with it and reasons why. So I won't have to talk about that now at the end of the video. I've talked about that. Diaspora is interesting. The Earth is sort of dying. This is in the very far future. There are still humans in the sense that humanity's taken kind of 3 different tracks. So you've got your fleshers, and these are the most human-like as we know humans today. But basically they have bioenhancements to sort of exist in this much tougher environment than we live in now. So think of humans, but that maybe have gills because they're living in the water. And some of it's luxury and some of it's necessity, these bioenhancements. Then you have the Gleisner robots. These are basically android bodies, and your digital consciousness can be put into these bodies. So you still have a body, but you're much more indestructible. And then you've got the main kind of characters, which are the citizens, and they live on what's called polises. This is kind of like a hard drive, and this is just data consciousness. So you live as data, and you have a world around you, but it's because it's of your own making. It's holographic, and I mean, the sky's the limit in what you can do. So that's the kind of the interesting thing going into this to know. And then, there is a catastrophic event that has happened and another one that's gonna happen. And these citizen beings vaunt off across the universe in search of sentient life, in search of a new place to be, in search of answering the mysteries of the universe. I highly recommend this book. It is mind-bending, mind-blowing. Might as well just go to Incandescence next, also by Greg Egan. This is what great science fiction is all about. Also, I think it's good, if I remember correctly, I used the same Elton John song for the parody music tribute. I don't want to say parody because it makes it sound cheap. It's really tribute music. It's tribute to the story, but Elton John, the same Elton John song at the end of the video for both of these. Check that out. You have to let me know if you do watch these and you listen to the music at the end, especially if you've read the book, like which songs most evoke the book for you, or which ones did you like, or which songs did you know, anything you want to say about it. Incandescence is just like, it's solid space opera. This is one of those ones where you could get lost in the weeds with Greg Egan. He is talking about, he's following 2 paths here. There are beings in the far future who, again, exist as data. These are acorporeal beings. That word is getting harder and harder for me to say, although it's on my tongue because right before this video I was filming now I'm not going to talk about this one, Schild's Ladder review, Schild's Ladder by Greg Egan. So this is one I just finished rereading. It's often, okay, I guess we're not talking about this one just yet. This is one that we're talking about, again, acorporeal beings. So I was saying that word a lot on this video. This is sometimes referred to as like one of the hardest science fiction books to read. And I don't mean to diminish that or to elevate myself above. It's just, I think I read a lot of Egan and maybe that's why I got it. But at the same time, I feel like if you can just accept that there's going to be hard science in here, you might even get some of it, and some of it could go over your head, but general concepts you'll get. And if you're okay with that, you're going to be able to follow this story. This story is really great. There is a scientist. She goes and is working on graph theory and vacuum theories in space. Again, a catastrophe happens. Then we're 600 years, or I don't know, not 600 years, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of years, or maybe even thousands of years in the future. And a new set of scientists are working on resolving something related to her work. There's this huge, again, this catastrophe, and it's this, they're calling it the nova vacuum, and it's swallowing up planets whole, and everything is at threat, and they're trying to figure out how do we destroy this thing. And there's a space station there that's sort of, or a spaceship that's sort of keeping pace with the boundary of this nova vacuum that's expanding at half the speed of light, and it keeps backing up and backing up. And you've got 2 factions on this spaceship. One are the preservationists. They want to preserve the universe and destroy this vacuum so it doesn't destroy everything. And then you've got your yielders, and these are the ones that are basically, we're yielding to it, and we want to study it because there's so much to be learned there. And the question is can they work together? There is some room for collaboration, but what happens when they both come to the abilities to like study it or to destroy it? How did the yielders maybe convince the preservationists, look, don't destroy this just yet? It's very interesting. A lot of quantum theory, quantum physics, and I think that's why it has that reputation. It is hard to wrap your head around that. But again, if you allow it, it's a very visually rich story. And it's one of those things where you can just kind of go with the flow and not understand everything and just still be dazzled by the work that's put in front of you. Back to Incandescence. One thing that you should know about Greg Egan is alien feeling aliens. I mean, I don't know an author that book by book. I mean, there are other books that I've read where the aliens feel aliens, but like book by book aliens that feel alien. So there's 2 tracks on this one. One are these beings that are data-based, acorporeal, and they travel as data through the galaxy. And wherever they end up, they can have a body, and they call themselves, and it's kind of funny, jelly babies, and therefore then they can have a physical form if they want. So that group, and then that storyline, they're investigating something about this crazy power that exists in the center of the galaxy, and there is this DNA-based life that they're sort of checking out to see what that's all about. And then in the other storyline, you have these alien beings that are very unique aliens. Insects come to mind, and they're very small, and they live in this, I don't know, it's the crust of a moon that shattered or an asteroid or something like that. And they live in these tunnels, and they're not at all of evolved society. And they're just learning about Newtonian physics and things like that. And we're sort of learning as they learn. And that's really interesting because the math is in the geography, which is very heavy in this story, which could be overwhelming, and not so much overwhelming, but boring, I think, to a lot of people. But it's interesting because it's at a level, I think, where we can understand a lot of it, and it's very interesting at first. And they're just trying to understand their world, and we're understanding it along with them. And what do we know? Are these evolved beings that are looking for the source of this discovered DNA? Are they looking for this set of aliens on this rock or not? Maybe they are. It's just got all that stuff that makes science fiction great when you think about, like, what are the wonders of space? Imagining alien races, imagining the expanses of space. Greg Egan, Incandescence. I don't want this video to be an hour long, so I'm going to try to go a little faster through these. Norstrillia. This is interesting. Before I forget, the music on this one is the theme song from Cheers, so you have to watch that one. I had a lot of fun doing this one, and this is a fun book, so that's why I kind of had fun with the music a little bit more than maybe with some of the others. And we are following a character who is on this planet where, you know, their big commodity is these sheep that creates this drug called Sturgeon, and it's an immortality drug. So this planet is, you know, vastly wealthy, more so by magnitudes above any other place. So there's a constant kind of threat there. People who live on this planet have great wealth, but they're also expected to have an ability to speak telepathically, and they're tested for this. So at a certain age, they're tested, and if you fail, you're put to death. That's it. You know, we have to have some kind of population control, and if you're not, okay, then you're all right. The main character in this story, he's somewhere on the spectrum of being able to what they call speak and hear, meaning telepathically speak. And I think the way they spell it is like speak and hear. I think it's like S-P-I-E-K and H-I-E-R, hear. So not the typical spelling. And there is some politics going on. Some people don't like the idea that he's not put to death because he owns this very expensive farm, sheep farm, we'll call it, and or compound, what have you. And so he has to kind of escape his planet and go to Earth. I don't want to spoil this. It's just a really fun read. You get some really weird animalian type creatures. It's a lot of fun. The best book I read all year was Samuel R. Delany's Dhalgren. This is a second reread, so the third time reading this. This is just an amazing book. It's a hard one to recommend because there is some vulgarity in this. There's a lot of sex, and some people don't like that in their book, and it's not your typical, not even your Shades of Grey. I haven't read Shades of Grey, so I don't know, but I'm gonna expect that, like, there's some sex in here that's a bit further out than you're gonna find even in Shades of Grey. But it's a really great story. People will say, like, it doesn't need the science fiction to still be the story it is. I think the science fiction plays a part, especially because it puts you in this fictional city where a catastrophe has happened, and you're sort of blocked off from the rest of the world. So that creates this environment kind of like Robert Charles Wilson's book Spin, where the earth is shielded in a dome. So you're in the city, you're following characters that are really interesting. The main character, Kid, he doesn't know his name. He's got like this low-grade amnesia. So they give him the name Kid, and we're basically following him around and his exploits. He just runs into really interesting, weird people. Eventually he ends up as part of this gang, the Scorpions. And the Scorpions, there's like 20 different characters, and every one of them is really, really interesting. And there's a lot of like kind of challenging a lot of preconceived notions we have about identity, sex, and things like that. Highly recommend Dhalgren if you are okay jumping into something that is very adult and has, you know, at times strong language and strong sexual events. Another favorite of mine is Isaac Asimov's Foundation in the Foundation series. I reread Foundation and Empire, and Second Foundation this year. I only did the review, I think, on Foundation. Maybe I'll do a review of all 3 books, and then I'll continue on with the series, which I've read the full series before as well. But to do any kind of justice to that, I'm going to have to do rereads on the rest of the series forward the Foundation. And then even there was, after Asimov's death, they let Greg Bryn, and David Brin and Gregory Benford do another trilogy of the Foundation series. And if you haven't watched my top 210 science fiction books episode, David Brin and Greg Bear, 2 of these idols of science fiction that I had growing up and that got me interested in science fiction, were actually on that video talking about writing entries into that series. So that's really cool. Check that out. In this, we've got Harry Seldon, who creates psychohistory, which is a predictive science and predicts the fall of the Galactic Empire. And there's a lot in here about, he predicts, you know, what needs to happen. He sets up this foundation of scientists to try to shepherd in, based on these predictions, a new galactic empire. Not necessarily shepherd it in, but the prediction is that when the empire falls, there's going to be thousands of years of dark ages. The idea with psychohistory is, let's make these little shifts that we can make to affect changes where that dark ages period is a lot shorter. Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham. This is sort of an apocalyptic story, very old book. This one, again, wasn't one of my favorite reads, but it was a classic, and it was a gap for me, so this was one of the things I read new this year. Most of the stuff I've read has been rereads. I do rereads because, like, I know what to expect, and I know they're going to be good. If I didn't have a YouTube channel, would I be doing all these rereads? I'm not sure. Probably the Egan stuff, yeah, because they warrant rereads, and Dhalgren, I'll reread that 10 more times in my life, I'm sure. But also, because I'm doing a YouTube channel, I want to talk about the books that I really love, so that's why a lot of these books I've reread. This one is probably not one that I'll reread anytime soon, if at all. It has value. It was entertaining. I always enjoyed the reading experience. This is set in London. It's like the 50s or the 60s. There is an event that happens where there's like a meteor shower and everybody goes blind. Few people don't, like this one guy who has bandages around his eyes because of some other accident that he had. And so that protected him from going blind. And so he's one of the few sighted people. And so there's definitely, like, the main thing I remember from this is kind of the trolley problem ideas. If you are sighted, should you take care of the sighted people and yourself because you have a better chance of success? Or do you help the other people who are not sighted because maybe you save them for a little bit, but then you're also creating risks there. I'm not going to go too deep into that. The other thing that you've got going on is you have these plants called the Triffids that are like 10 foot tall at their highest, or 10 meters, probably 10 feet tall. And they have these big, like, long whip things that dispense poison and will kill you. So imagine you're walking around. So there's a little bit of a horror element. That didn't resonate that much for me. It wasn't very scary. It's an interesting read if you want, like, to have a full feel of, like, classic science fiction, and make sure you check off all the books on the list that are considered classics. It's probably one to read. I can't remember I remember the song in this, but I actually don't remember the name of it. It's the one that goes I think it's called like Two Princes or something like that. Anyway, that was another one that I was really kind of silly with the lyrics and the music, because that is kind of a silly song, but that was fun to do. Now I'm really going out of order because I'm going with More Than Human. I just recently put this video up on the channel. This is Theodore Sturgeon. This is science fiction fantasy, and it's about this, it's called homogestalt. So you have these kind of 5 lonely beings or 6 lonely beings, and they all come together to form like kind of one entity representing evolution in humanity. They don't actually merge their bodies together, but they all have different telepathic or telekinesis type powers that kind of blend together, or they call it bleshing, meshing and blending, and it makes them superior to regular humans. So there are some questions about, what are ethics and what is morality and what role does that play once you are sort of like a super being. This was fun because I immediately got the music for this one. I did Lady Gaga, Beyond the Edge of Human. Although in my head, I'm thinking right now I could have done Ace of Base, that song, To Become One. To become one. And I could have done like 5 Become One. No, but I really loved the Lady Gaga music that I did for this. So this one's a lot of fun. Check that out. Another old one. I think I got a lot of old books that I read this year, a lot of rereads. Another one is The Forever War by Joe Haldeman. I always say Joel Haldeman, so I want to make sure I said it correctly this time. Joel Haldeman. And the green might not show well on the green screen, so let's also do this one, which is, I guess, also green. And we have this soldier who, we are at war with this alien race. Time dilation is big in this one because we send these guys over to fight, and, 10 minutes pass over, like on the way over, and already you've got years passing on Earth. So, once you're over there for like years, a 2-year tour, you got hundreds of years that are passing on Earth. So every time you come back, the Earth is going to look a lot different. That's the most interesting thing about this one. At some point, homosexuality is sort of the norm because it's population control, pretty much. So that's interesting for a book that was written in, God, is this written in the 70s? Yeah. So that's kind of interesting for that. Good parody music on that one that I really liked. I wish I could remember which song it was because I would tell you. We've got Mountain in the Sea by Ray Naylor. This one was actually, this is a new release, so one of the few new releases I've read this year. This is interesting, looking at octopus as sentient life. And we've got some Cutting Crew parody music for that one. I also did, I think that's most of the ones I've reviewed. I did a What's So Special About the Three Body Problem series, the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy by Cixin Liu, and this one I reviewed last year, I think, but the series as a whole, I've done all 3 books, but this year the one I did was for all 3 books together. I did them individually before. This is an interesting one. I'm not going to go through that one now because I talked about it a lot on the channel. You can find that if you want to look at it. I also did a Mars week this year. Last year, you might remember, I did a Cyberpunk week where I did 5 days in a row. Every single day I released a Cyberpunk episode, like what is Cyberpunk, the origins of Cyberpunk, top 10 Cyberpunk, all of those episodes. So if you like Cyberpunk and you're interested and you haven't seen that, check that out because there's a lot of cyberpunk information there if you're curious about that subgenre. I also did Time Travel Week last year where I did 5 episodes of time travel. I had 2 different top 10s, a top 10 classic time travel sci-fi, top 10 modern time travel sci-fi. This year I did Mars Week. There's so much Mars fiction, so I did 5 days of Mars fiction. I did essential Mars fiction, essential Martians fiction, which could really be the same thing almost. I did a top 10 Mars week. I did a TBR, and I did one where I rated, gave star ratings, which I don't usually do. These aren't all the books, but some of the books I talked about were D.G. Compton's Farewell Earth's Bliss. Of course, The Martian. That was on my top 10 list. The Martian Time Slip. This is an Italian version, so you can look at that because you might not usually see that cover. Martian Rainbow. That's Robert L. Forward. We've got Maury McHugh's China Mountain Zhang. Ray Bradbury's, of course, this is on the top 10. The Martian Chronicles, one of my favorite books all time. This is a short story compilation. And then can't have Mars Week without The War of the Worlds. And then finally, these are books that I've reread or read recently that I'm gonna have, you'll see reviews of these on the channel. If they might already be on there, if some of them won't be though. So these are my most recent ones. I did a reread of City, and I did this review before, but I refilmed it a little bit. So you'll see that. For some reason, I've got 3 different copies of that. I restarted the Vorkosigan Saga by Lois McMaster Behold, and I started with Shards of Honor because I like to go in publication order. I'm going to reread Barriar soon, which is the next book. And this is Cordelia Naismith of Beta Colony. She hasn't crashed. She's doing like geological, biological survey on this planet that she didn't realize that has already sort of been claimed by this military this really military strong planet called Barriar. And so she crosses paths with this kind of notorious character, Errol Verkosgan. Heavy space opera. I'm not going to spoil it. These are quick, fast reads. They're really fun, but they are also very deep. And the series is like 20 books long, at least, stories, short stories, novels. Solaris, this will be coming up soon. I'm really happy I just finished the music on this one, Radiohead based. And this is a deeply philosophical novel. We have scientists on this survey station about 100 feet hovering above this giant ocean on the planet Solaris. The ocean is not really an ocean, it's a sentient being, like a large brain, and it's like a gelatinous ocean. I guess you could call it an ocean. And it's really interesting because the ocean is causing the scientists to see things, and it gets pretty deep. I'll let you think of, there go the books. I have a lot of them. And I finished up an Adrian Tchaikovsky series this year. I have reviews already up last year for Shards of Earth. That was before I was doing music, so there's no music on that one, I don't think. And then Eyes of the Void was the sequel, which was really quick paced. I do have a pretty cool REM theme song for that one, so check that out. Shards of Earth was really great. It was kind of slow in the first 200 pages because Tchaikovsky did a lot of work to kind of do character building, world building, and I think purposely so, and it was worthwhile, and it was necessary because it made the rest of the book go very quickly, and it made the sequel, Eyes of the Void, go very fast, highly action-packed. It's a very good series. This was the final installment. Same thing. I was expecting it to be as fast as Eyes of the Void, so I had my expectations a little high, so it felt a little short of that in the action, but as a story, really good space opera, really cool alien species, really cool characters. There are these moon-sized architects that are destroying planets, and it's like, who are these architects? Where did they come from? We can't defeat them. Is somebody else sending them? This is the finale. Tchaikovsky really sticks to the landing on this. Very excellent read. Yeah, I guess a little bit more on that. We have these characters that are called intermediaries. The main one is this guy, Idris, and he basically can connect to these moon-sized architects, kind of barely, but these things are like the sizes of moons, so like he can't really talk to them, but just enough to say, look, hey, we're people, we're here, don't kill us. And there's some confusion with that. And these intermediaries are also important because in interstellar travel, they can navigate what's called unspace, which is basically the form of faster than light travel that gets you from A to B. They're interesting. There's a race of women that are souped up uber humans. These are women that are grown in parthenogenic vats, and they sort of represent an evolution of humanity. And of course, humans are a little bit skeptical of them too, because it's like, are these people, are they eventually a threat to us? Right now, they're helping to protect us, but will they eventually be a threat? There's another race called the Divine Essiel, and they're like highly technological being, but there's sort of like a cult worship, religious aspect to them. And then a bunch of other alien life forms that are interesting that actually play big roles in this too. So it's not just like, here's a whole bunch of aliens and here's like two that we're really gonna look at. You see a lot of aliens in this one. So anyway, that's most of what I've read this year, most of what I've reviewed this year, and what I'm going to review. So look forward to that. If you have any questions, ask me down in the comments. Otherwise, thank you for watching. I'm Michael Everts, and this is Fit to be Read.